Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another wonderful Sunday evening with Brian and Janice. We are so glad that you're joining us this evening, and we look forward to you sharing this video with many people as you can. We are at a crucial time in American history right now, and we're not going to get into the voting scheme of things today, but we do want to encourage you to get out and vote. And remember, Brian and I are wearing these t-shirts today. And thank you, Michelle Summers. You are awesome. Thank you so much for blessing us with these beautiful t-shirts. And it says, vote like it's 1965. And that is truly how crucial it is. I want to encourage you to go back and look at some of the other videos that we've done. And I need you to understand that what Brian and I are doing, it is to help you. We care about others. It is not for us. Even though it helps us, we care about others. And we encourage you to share as much of this information as possible with other people. I also want to remind people, and this is just a plug from me to Dr. Tanya Chestnut. Vote for Dr. Tanya Chestnut. She is running for School Board District of Education for this district, Montgomery, Selma. You guys need to realize I've known her for many, many years. And if anyone has a passion for children, she does. So please vote for Dr. Tanya Chestnut for School Board of Education. Also, today we're going to be talking about civil rights versus human rights. What is the difference? There is a difference, and I need you to understand that. So without further ado, I'm going to let Brian break it down to you, because just like you guys are learning, I'm learning as well, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey.
Good evening, Facebook family. Good evening, YouTube family. So our discussion today, as Janice said, our topic will be on human rights versus civil rights. And we all know that basically civil rights, when we look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we actually get our definition of what civil rights are concerning this country and that we all exist in, called the United States. Civil rights are drastically different from human rights. And as we continue to go into detail about it, we'll break it down further. But just to give you a real quick, simple definition between human rights and civil rights. Human rights are basically fundamental rights that every human being has.
Yes.
Every human being is entitled to the basic human rights of existence. Okay, so you're entitled to protection. You're entitled to being born with the birthright of being labeled a human being. Okay, so all of these human rights entails the basic fundamentals that all human beings have. And it's not based on any prejudices. It's not based on any discriminations. It's not based on color. It's not based on race. It's not based on sex. It's based on you being a human being and actually existing. So those are the fundamental things as it relates to human rights. Okay, so now let's shift for a minute, because in the United States, we have, or black people have, basic civil rights, okay, which is a big, big difference. Why is it different, Brian? It's different because civil rights are set by a nation or by a state, and they can either be granted to you or they can be deprived from you. Yes. So the state basically controls how they view you, what they actually give you as it relates to basic fundamental rights of being a citizen, not a human being. That is the basic difference. When we talk about civil rights refers to nation or statehood citizenship. Human rights refers to the basic human rights that all nations owe you by existing and being a human being. So now, having said that, brothers and sisters, we have to understand that in the first Civil Rights Act that was written by the United States in 1875, that was pushed by Senator Charles Sumner, that gave us the right to participate in public venues, gave us the right of free travel, to be able to sit on buses, trains at that particular time, because the railroad system was a basic fundamental way of traveling.
Yes.
It was the essential way of traveling at that time, across state lines. So those were basic civil rights given by this nation to black people. Now, what was failed to be addressed in that was the fact that these black people that were once property had now obtained the title of citizen. That never really took place. That was never defined. So at any moment, your civil rights could be rescinded. Okay? So in 1883, the Supreme Court overturns that. We've gone through the whole, we've given you the history of the civil rights, first Civil Rights Acts and the civil rights. Okay, so in 1883, Supreme Court overturns that. Why did they overturn that? Because literally up under the civil rights laws, okay, and up under the Constitution, civil rights can actually be deprived concerning an individual's basic social functions in society. Okay? So in 1883, when that's overturned by the Supreme Court, is not a surprise. So 90 years later, 1964, we're fighting again for the same thing since we have come to this country, and that is basic civil rights. Civil rights, I say this and I'll say this again to you, only belongs to citizens. If you were a citizen of this country, you would not have had to fight
For civil
90 years later for the same thing
That's right.
that we fought for when we came out of slavery. Okay? Real simple. So now let's look at it on a broad scale. Human rights states basically that no matter what nation you go to, every nation has to treat you as a human being. That means you as a human being, there are certain rights that you have that are protected up under the UN banner of human rights. Okay? So let's talk about that. So I'm gonna let you interject here real briefly as it relates to civil rights. And if you have any maybe illustration that you can give of what would be a violation of a civil right as opposed to a human right, what would you say to that, Janice?
He's putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
I think I'm a bit I can handle myself. You know, when I think of civil rights, I think one of the key components I think about is a human right I would look at a human right as having qualifications for a particular job. Okay.
Okay.
You applying for that job as an me applying for that job as an African American woman, and another female being of another nationality, she could be Caucasian, applying for that job as well. Myself being more qualified than she is, and she gets the job.
Okay.
And
So
I
is that a
feel-
civil matter or is that a human rights matter? As far as a human rights matter, a job doesn't have to hire you in order for you to be equal in essence of your existence.
it's a civil rights matter.
Okay, so it's a civil rights matter,
But
not a human rights matter.
Well,
How would it be a human rights matter if a job doesn't want to hire you because you're more qualified or less qualified? That has nothing to do with your existence, right?
right.
Okay, so what I'm showing you is that a human rights issue is an issue if you were going to the same job and you were with a person, use the same illustration that you're using, that was another person. Let's throw out resumes, let's throw out anything as it relates to qualifications for the job, because the job really is not relevant.
Okay.
It's irrelevant in this situation as it relates to human rights. Okay, so human rights, what they cannot deny you is that you are a human being just as the other person is a human being.
So I have the right to apply for the job.
Well, you have the right to apply for the job, but they have to look at you as a human. Period. Okay, so let's take rights out, because rights only, when we talk about rights up under the law, and that's a legal thing when you start dealing with certain rights. But when you deal with human rights basically defines your existence, and up under that existence, that you are to be treated as a human being and not as anything less than that. Okay, so you can't walk through the door and they say, well, because you're not human, Janice, we're not going to entertain your resume. You understand the difference? Okay, so a civil right is when what you gave was more so of an illustration of a civil right. Okay, so under the civil rights and an affirmative action plan, which now is really insignificant when it comes to African Americans, because the affirmative action plan that was written now is being used by everybody to get certain things handed to them. Okay, so what you're describing is affirmative action up under civil rights. Okay, so under civil rights and under affirmative action, that employee, human resources manual may say, well, we have to at least have 5% blacks working here,
Right.
or minority. They would
Yes.
call you a minority, or minority working here. So now that would put you having a equal chance of being hired, not a greater chance, because they still do not have to employ you, even though the human resources manual, their company policy may be that they have to have a certain number of African Americans. That's what affirmative action was written for in the beginning. But like I said, now you have everybody using it. You have the LGBTQ
Right.
community
Everybody's using it.
You have the immigrants using it. Everybody can use it now. Okay, so it's not so much applicable anymore to African Americans as it once was when it was initially written into law.
Okay.
So you were describing a civil right. Okay, like I said, a human right is they cannot deny you if you walk through the door. They cannot say, well, Janice is less than a human of that person, so we're not going to entertain interviewing her or accepting her application based on the notion that she is less than a human being. Okay? No, so you're no less, regardless of the persuasion, regardless of whether you're an African woman, you're a Caucasian woman, you're an Asian woman. That is not applicable as it relates to human rights. Human rights see you all the same. You are a human being that was born with divine rights from your creator. You exist in this earth and you deserve to be treated as every other human being on this planet. Okay? So in 1948, guys, the concept of human rights was actually formed. That is the inception of human rights. The whole concept of human rights comes from after World War II, and during World War II, the mistreatment of the Jews by the Nazis. Okay, so after that, the development of human rights is formed by the United Nations organization. okay, with the atrocities that happened with the Jews. We know that history says 6 million plus Jews were slaughtered, and what happened was the inhumaneness of the torture of what they went through was no better than them being animals. So they put in place part of human rights up under the UN. Part of that document states that you have to be, and should be, as a human being, protected from torture. That came directly from what happened in the concentration camps of the Jews by way of and by the hands of the Nazis. You understand?
I understand.
Okay, so now look at that. That was in 1948 after World War II. Now, I have to take you back to history. Okay?
Yes.
All right, so we have to go back.
Yes.
The transatlantic slave trade and this is my number from my studies, between 15 million and 30 million African people were murdered, were tortured, okay, were annihilated. You have the Tasmanian people were the whole group, the whole race was genocide. So looking at that and understanding that the UN puts a order in place by law that after the World War II and after the Jews and being in a concentration camp, by any other nation had the right to exist as any other human being, seeing that was put in place then, and nothing was done as relates to the African concerning restitution, even with the UN being up under a different name during the 1800s, because we know in the 1800s, the UN as we know today did not exist, okay? Yeah. But even after the fact, here's my problem that I have. Even after the fact, with knowing the history of what happened, there was nothing put in place as it relates to the atrocities of African people and our forefathers, foreparents, and their descendants concerning the torture. Now, watch this. After the UN puts this in place, what happens next is restitution and reparation being paid to the Jews.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, understand this. America did not participate in the slaughter of the Jews, but America was one of the countries that signed on to assist in paying reparations to the Jews. Okay?
So Brian, let me ask you this. Why would the U.S. assist in paying the Jews when they had nothing to do with them being?
Basically to form an ally in the Middle East.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
So after this, we see the creation of the nation state Israel in Palestine. Okay? What is Palestine now? That's called Israel. We see the development of the nation state. We see the Havara document that was written. Okay, and you have 4 countries to sign on to the Havara document. Okay, United States being one.
One of them, yes.
Okay, due to that, when they signed on to support the nation of Israel financially in building it up so that it would become its watchdog in the Middle East. That is the simplest way to put it. Okay? Allies are no more than watchdogs. That is my terminology that I use to help you understand when we talk about allies, when that term is thrown around, they're no more than political watchdogs to keep order and for the United States to remain in power in certain areas of the globe. Okay? In the Middle East, the United States need a watchdog over there that will protect their interests concerning oil, okay, gold, and other natural resources, other commodities that are plentiful in that
those
region.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So in 1948, that happens. That solidifies. It puts in cement the document of human rights being applicable to every human being that exists. Okay. So now, let me take you to 1964. Malcolm X goes make his famous journey in March of 1964 to Mecca. Okay. After he leaves Mecca, he goes to Cairo, Egypt, and he petitions the Organization of African Americans Unity meeting. If they're having a conference, and he is representing African Americans in the Americas. Okay, what he asks them to do, he lays out the conditions of the Americas and the conditions and the treatments of the people in America.
The mistreatment.
That's exactly right. Okay, so we know this is prior to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, but we know 1964 the Civil Rights Act was signed by Lyndon B. Johnson.
Yes.
Okay, so now Malcolm is over there and he's petitioning on behalf of human rights. Okay, so he is saying that the treatment of the African is no better than that of the Jew that you protected in 1948 after World War II and paid restitution and reparations to. The treatment of African people, 22 million African, Malcolm said, in America is no better. That not only are the civil rights being violated, but this is a fight for basic human rights. So he petitions the Organization of African American Unity, which he represents. He petitions the African Committee to file a petition with the UN for the violation of human rights, African Americans' human rights being violated in the United States. Now, Malcolm took his fight to a legal level, and I believe that outside of what everybody talk about Malcolm's assassination, from everything I've studied and all the documentaries that I'm sure everybody has tuned into him, if Malcolm would have been successful in this, then it would have changed the course of African Americans in the United States and possibly could have gotten some form of restitution or either reparations paid to those descendants of slaves. Okay? So very, very powerful, everyone, to understand the difference between human rights, the difference between civil rights. Civil rights can be denied of you. Human rights can never be deprived. Human rights can be denied every day. Civil rights can be denied every day. Human rights cannot be denied because that is your basic roadmap as a person to exist and be entitled to all other rights as any human being to exist. So if that means having fresh water, breathing fresh air, if that means having adequate housing, if that means if government is going to run the nation, then government have to treat all human beings the same. That means that there could not be any favorites. There cannot be any rich, middle class, and poor.
Exactly.
Okay, so look at what the fight was. as it relates to what Malcolm was trying to do. And not only that, when you look at what we deal with today, see, one area, I think one mistake that our civil rights leaders made was they did not continue the fight on a national and international level. They should have kept the struggle going that Malcolm had implemented and what Malcolm started in that he was determined to fight for the basic human rights of African American people to exist and not be treated any differently than any other people in the world.
Yes.
And not only that, due to the atrocities, due to the tortures that had been placed upon the slaves,
yes,
that their descendants deserved just as the Jews
deserved. Yes.
They deserved some form of restitution and reparations,
Yes.
so that they could start over again on equal footing with everybody else. That is the basic human right, to have the same, be able to start at the same level that everyone else starts at.
And we weren't.
We were never
do
there.
That for us.
Yeah, we were never there, and we will never be there, unfortunately, because we operate under the banner of civil rights, and civil rights is no more than a cloak and dagger, and it is used, the cloak and dagger of civil rights hides the hand of the knife that stabs you in the back. That's what it does.
Can you say that again,
Okay,
Brian?
so the cloak and dagger of civil rights is no more than a garment that hides the hand of the knife that stabs you in the back. Okay, civil rights were never intended to give you full, equal enjoyments and opportunity as those who call themselves citizens of this country, who the Constitution labeled citizens. Okay? And we just have to face the fact that civil rights, to have to be brought up again in 1964, and we just dealt with this last week on integration as opposed to separation and segregation. Okay? To have to fight to sit at a lunch counter and be treated with the same dignity and respect as any other man sitting at a lunch counter is not a civil rights issue. It is more so of a human rights issue, because for that person to not only deny you, but to treat you any kind of way in respect of you not being a human being says that they do not see you on the same equal level as themselves. So we were confused in fighting for the wrong thing, my brothers and sisters. We should have been attacking not only this country, and like I said, because states and nations set civil laws, they can change them at any time also.
Anytime.
Okay? If a law is made by a state or nation, a law can be changed.
Yes.
And not only that, it can always be, the law can be written in such a way to where it continues to exclude you when they're saying that you are inclusive. Okay? So they can set certain mandates. I'll give you a good illustration of that. Good illustration of that, because in the Civil Rights Act, it said that we had the right to be educated as any other people would be educated, okay?
Okay.
So now let me give you an illustration. Education up under a Civil Rights Act saying that I have the right to be educated as any other person is educated, okay? But it does not say that you have the same right to go into the same classroom. It really doesn't. That's not what the law is about. You understand what I'm saying? So when you talk about the civil law of education, it simply states that you have the right to be educated as any other person.
But we
Now,
go into the same classrooms.
now you go into the same classrooms. Okay? We made that a civil issue because we looked at what our counterpart was receiving as opposed to what we were receiving.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So now, when you have Brown versus the Board of Education, their argument is if we integrate, then that corrects the civil problem. It did not correct the civil problem. Okay? Because now what you did with the child was you put him in an environment where he is discriminated against purposely, not only by the teachers, but by the children also. So now not only are we denying him of basic civil liberties, we're also mistreating him based under the human rights document, in the human rights law. Now we're discriminating against him, and the human rights law says that you cannot discriminate or show any prejudices toward any other human being. It doesn't put a color on it. Remember I told you, human rights, there's no color when it comes to human rights.
Okay.
If you are a human being and you bleed blood, that's red, okay, not green, then okay, you have the same rights up under the human rights laws as any other person. So the fight was in the wrong courthouse. It really was. When we go to lobby, when Dr. King them sit down with Johnson, it should have been that we want the Constitution to reflect human rights laws as it relates to black people. Okay? That way, we're not in 2020 still fighting for the same old rights that we supposedly got in 1964 and in 1875. Okay? When in 1948, up under the UN human rights law, it corrected everything as it related to the basic existence of a person in a country having the same rights as any other person.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
So,
following you.
all right. So
Yes.
we those are some of the like I said, some of the errors that I think was made because we did not pay attention enough to what is the difference, and if we're existing up under a civil union, then civility is in the hands of the interpreter of the law. Okay, so we left it in the hands of the oppressor to say whether or not we could enjoy the same civil liberties that they enjoy.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so listen, family, it's something that we need to revisit. It's something that some things that I'm raising within the family is that certain parts of the Constitution. Now, when you look at the 14th Amendment, everybody's going to go there. 14th Amendment now doesn't do anything for black people. It is really an obsolete amendment at this point as it relates to black people being citizens. We are still having to fight the age-old battle of citizenship. Why? Because we are allowing the same oppressor that enslaved our foreparents to make laws that continue to enslave their children. Now it's just systematically and not in physical chains. Does you understand
Gotcha.
that?
Yes.
Okay. So we see that the least of these in our community are continuing to be affected because they cannot break away from the system. So if they do not have the same opportunity of education as someone that may work their way through the system and get a scholarship, or may be gifted so beyond measure,
You're right.
okay,
Uh-huh.
that he cannot or she cannot be denied a scholarship. You understand? And that they are so brilliant that they can learn this European and westernized model of education and move on to the next level, then there are exceptions to every rule.
Yes.
But the exception is not the greater of the community. It is always the lesser of the community. That's where you get W.E. Du Bois, what we talked about this past Friday, 10%. Okay? Rule comes into play where he talks about the 10% of the intellectuals that do have the opportunity to be educated are obligated and responsible for going back and helping those that don't have that same opportunity.
So, Brian,
Yep.
it sounds like we're going to be in this fight forever. It's
Well, we are in the fight forever. I mean, the fight never stops.
Stops.
It is not going to cease with this election. And Janice encouraged everybody to vote. We all want you all to go out and vote. It's essential because voting is part of the fight. Let me say that. But it does not stop with the vote. See, regardless of who gets elected, we have to understand that government was formed based on the concept of capitalism. You see, you have to go back to 310 BCE when Aristotle goes into Egypt, and I talked about that.
Yes, you did.
Okay, and he's educated for 20 years in Egypt. Plato comes behind him. He's educated for 13 years, and they learn a system of government and how that system operates as it relates to. So African people have always had government in their DNA. We are the creators of government. So when Aristotle takes this back to Athens in Greece, he forms that government. You understand?
Yes.
And the government exists based off of import, export, trade.
Yes.
So it is a form of capitalism. Capitalism drives government. Okay? What allows the government to continue to flow is having designated authority that controls the capital. Okay? So listen. The Democrats and the Republicans are overseers of the capital, period. That's how simple that is. It's nothing difficult about it. And the means to the end are the same. They are no different. Okay? The Republican Party gets it one way. The Democratic Party gets it another. Okay?
Yeah.
There is no difference. They are basically the same entity.
Yes.
Functioning in two different spectrums, but the same purpose is intended to happen. Okay, so there's really no difference. So we go and vote. We vote because yes, we understand the importance.
Yes.
We understand the sacrifice. And I always say this, that the greatest power that you have in the vote is on the local level as it relates to your senators, your congressmen. That is where the power lies.
Yes.
When it comes to a national vote, okay? When it comes to a local community, you have much power because you get a chance to vote in judges, you get a chance to vote in city council members, you get a chance to vote in governors, mayors, things of that. And so your power is much greater on a local level, okay? But the national level, we can affect change by getting the right representation in place, okay? How much of the electoral college we affect is based on count. So that's why each party pushes for everybody to go out and vote.
Exactly.
Okay, because states have a certain number of electoral votes based off of the popular vote or the most votes for each candidate.
That's it.
So we can go into that another time. We can
Right.
really do a lesson on understanding how your vote works. Because a lot of people don't know how their vote works. They don't understand the process of voting. They don't do research on candidates that are on the ticket, whether it be a congressman, a senator. So they don't know the issues that are being pushed.
Exactly.
Okay, so and when that is the case, then your vote is powerless because you're just going there to fill out a ticket. You're not voting in the interest of your needs. Everybody that vote need to vote in the interest of their needs. Okay,
Exactly.
so and that goes back to what we were talking about, knowing the difference between a human right and a civil right. You as a human being, if your life is affected based on a vote, then you as a human being have that right to go and say, this is what I want to happen to my life, or this is what I don't want to happen.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the
Yes.
power behind understanding
The vote.
human rights, civil rights, how it connects to the vote, how it connects to every basic function that you will deal with as a person. We need to understand that. So we got to go back to the Constitution because constitutions are written by nations and written by states, and nations and states control civil rights.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yes.
So the fight is always going to be at that nation-state level until we do like Malcolm and we go back to the drawing board and we go and say, no, we've got now over 40 million, 50 million, 60 million African-American descendants
Yes.
of the enslaved
Yes.
ancestors that
Yes.
worked and labored with no economic, none at all, no type of reward, that in the treatment in the system of these people now is just as worse as the torture of those that were in the concentration camps. When you look at police brutality, that's just a fraction of what we experience. It is nothing compared to you. What we have to do is have a mind and an eye open to understand that the plight of our kids being automatically put into a system that is not designed to help them, not designed to give them a leg up, but designed to keep them in a certain class and keep them functioning at a certain level as relates to being a mediocre and very subservient type of individual. It is just as worse when you look at the penal system that has been designed and starting in grade school,
Yes.
and preschool at the age of 4, labeling our young boys. Okay, now our young girls are labeled just as much. It is no more than a tool to use to actually give that child a record. I tell all people that I've counseled
Yes.
and parents that I talk to, if you allow the school to label your child, then you have allowed the school to give him his first criminal record. It will follow him for the rest of his life.
Wow.
This is about basic human rights. See, I should be, as a human, have the same right to learn as anybody else. And I should not be relegated to learning one way. And it should not be only your way that I learn. When I'm relegated to learning only the Western way of being taught,
Wow.
then that says that I have to function as a Western European in order to exist in your nation or state. So as a human being, I'm saying, no, I deserve to be taught and to learn the way that my culture learned. You can't understand my brilliance because I learn different.
You don't know my culture.
You may be an audio learner. I may be a visual learner. That's why you see the hieroglyphs.
Yes.
That's why you see
Yes.
on the papyri certain images written.
Yes.
So we have to understand it is a violation
Of
for
ours.
our rights to say that you cannot learn but one way. It is a violation to say that I have to prepare for a test and not be prepared to learn. That is a violation of basic human existence as it relates to learning. So we have to go back to the drawing board. We have to understand that it is much deeper than just a vote. Okay? As important as that is, we have to understand that we have to continue to push, and we have to continue to vote in our interest and make sure that those that represent us as black people understand that we want something more. It is not just about civil rights anymore, because civil rights have not worked. They didn't work in 1875 when the Supreme Court overturned them. They didn't work in 1964. Here it is, 2020, and we still have got the same dog and pony show.
That's right.
Okay, so we have to educate ourselves enough to understand that we need to be seeking laws on an international level.
Yes.
We got to get back to Malcolm's mentality. Until those 22 million Americans, Malcolm said, that suffered the same conditions and torture as the Jews are free, then I'm also the same as they are. I am no different. That is my blood. They are my people. That is my sister. That is my brother, regardless of whether they're college educated or no education. They are still my brothers and sisters. And until they are liberated, then I'm still in the struggle. I'm still enslaved as well. So we have to get back to the mindset of not thinking that we've got our little pie in the sky and that's all that it takes. That's a very selfish spirit. It's an inhumane spirit, because it says now that you see yourself better as a human than your brother who's also a human, regardless of the condition. See, condition does not define humanity. It doesn't matter what condition humanity is defined by you existing, and you are entitled divinely to be treated on the same equal level as everybody else.
Yes.
So we should not do. Where black people fail is we discriminate against ourselves.
That's it.
We hate, and when you hate yourself, you'll hate your brother and sister. Let me say that. Okay? Because all self-hate starts with the individual first. You can't hate your brother until you first hate yourself. So there's some underlying issues that you have when you cannot love folks, even if I don't care how, and I can't say what I want to say, but I don't care how bad they may act. Let's just put it that way. Or how uncivil they may act, or what dirt they do. They're still human beings. Does everybody understand that? So, and you, just like you are a human being, they are human beings, and they deserve to be treated fairly and justly. They deserve to be protected. They deserve to have the same opportunities as anybody else. I grew up in the ghetto, so I can testify to the fact that opportunities for children that grow up in impoverished situations, even though I had two parents that worked hard, didn't know I was poor. I had great parents, grew up in a great home, and I'm very grateful for that. So my environment made it conducive for me to excel and to learn. And I had a father that instilled in me that there's nobody better than you, son. Okay? You're not better than anybody else, but there's nobody that's better than you. I understood that from an early age. So it pushed me to be the best. And I still think like that, but I do not think I'm any better than anybody else. Okay?
Exactly.
So we have to understand that, brothers and sisters. I want you all, and we're going to continue to dive into this even deeper. I'm just kind of giving you some foundational background on it, but we need to look into pushing our congressmen, pushing our senators to, and our leaders now, to make an appeal again, to take up this fight. Let's not leave Brother Malcolm's work undone. We push Dr. King's work.
Yes, we did.
with the civil rights
Right.
movement. And we still have not accomplished what Dr. King was really going for. See, what we never talk about is who Dr. King became in 67, 68 was drastically different from who he was in 63, 64, and 65.
Tell him, Brian.
Okay, so
Tell him.
we have to understand
Yes.
the difference. Dr. King began to become more conscious and aware that this was more than about civil rights. He began to understand the human injustices. That's where the Poor People's Campaign developed, from his conscious awareness that, hold up, this is just not getting it. We live in his speech, two different Americas, that Dr. King talks about this. So I can go on all night. I know I'm going on.
And that's all right.
Yeah.
I love you,
But-
Brian.
but,
I do. God, yes.
I just want you all to understand exactly what we are dealing with from a historical aspect. There's very little that has changed. Even though some feel that they may have arrived, you're only as good as your brother.
That's exactly right.
And I guarantee you, if you get stopped by a police that's racist, you're no different than the brother. It doesn't matter how much capital you have in the bank, and it doesn't matter how big your house is and what car you drive.
It doesn't matter.
You are the same
Yes.
as the brother and sister that is living off of a minimum wage, trying to make it every day, and did not have the same opportunity that you may have possibly had, or that somebody may have possibly given to you, or however that door opened.
Yes.
We cannot look on our brothers and sisters with the same eye of scrutiny that this Constitution looks on us with as a whole and collective. And that is, you're still fighting for citizenship under a Constitution that permanently puts you in a place to where the system would keep you a slave. That's the facts of the matter. So when you look at the Constitution, and I encourage everybody to read the Constitution, I read it almost every day.
Yes.
Okay, and I can probably quote you the whole Bill of Rights and everything else. And the more I read it, the more I see how the Constitution was set up to keep a permanent class of slaves in this country working off of free labor. Okay, that's what the penal system is truly about. That's why it says that up under the 13th Amendment and abolishment of slavery, it says that if any person goes to prison, then they can be treated as a slave. That is in the Constitution, that they are a slave. So that's why you see the penal laws. That's why you see the black clothes. That's why you see Jim Crowism. That's why you see all of that kick in, because that 13th Amendment says up under the penal system, they can still be slaves. And guess who built the railroads? When you look at right in Birmingham, the steel plant that was built by prisoners in Alabama, black men that were arrested for walking on the road without having an identification, black men that were walking on the streets after 6 p.m. in certain areas, sundown towns. All of those black men that got put in prison, and I want you all to research this, they got put in prison right here in Alabama, in Birmingham, between Birmingham and Montgomery. They built the railroad system. There were so many incarcerated within a 10-year period, from about 1878 to about 1888, that they had a whole workforce to build the railroad systems, to industrialize the South on free labor. This Constitution and these amendments that we thought was liberating us have done absolutely nothing for us. And at this particular moment in history, it does more for those that are coming over here that are immigrants. It does more now because women rights have the access to these rights and really lobby strongly based off of these 13th, 14th Amendment, the LGBTQ community. And that's whatever you do in your personal life, that's up to you. But I'm just saying those groups have more rights now than black people. And that is a sad thing, because those amendments were written with black people supposedly being the recipients. Okay? Now, black people include women. Black people may include, and that's how the law is interpreted. But it was for those that were slaves. You understand? Not for the immigrants coming over. Not even for the immigrant black. But that's a whole nother discussion. I won't get deep into that, okay? But what I'm showing you is that those same, and you can look at those as the first civil rights laws, or those amendments, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. You can look at that literally if you want to. That's why the fight continued. That's why Charles Sumner continued that fight.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yes.
So we'll end with that, but
Yes.
now I'll give you back over to you.
Brian, thank you so much. We appreciate your knowledge, and we gain nothing from this. The one thing that gives us joy is when people reach out and help others and share this knowledge. That is the only way we can make a difference. If you don't know, there's somewhere you can go to learn or to get that information. So we just pray that you all really get this and share with as many people as possible. I know I share daily, and I know a lot of people don't read it, don't look at it, or just delete it. But there's going to come a time that you're going to need it more than you need it now. And you better believe we all need to be ready for that time. I appreciate this man. I appreciate Brian. I love him not just because he belongs to me, he's a part of me, but I appreciate his knowledge, and I appreciate him for dedicating his life for this fight. He's not afraid. He studies to show himself approved day and night. So with that being said, I'm not, giving him any accolades. I'm just giving facts. We love you guys. We appreciate you. We want to help as many people as we can, and we want you to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. God bless you. Please go vote.
Yeah.
Vote like it's 1965. Again, Michelle Summers, thank you so much for all the great work that you're doing. We appreciate you, and we stand behind you. Again, I encourage you, Dr. Tanya Chestnut, thank you. Thank you. We love you guys, and may God bless. And we'll see you next week.
And remember, YouTube channel is Men and Women of Destiny.
Yes.
And also check out YouTube channel Education Nation. Let's support Professor Summers, who's doing a great work.
Great work.
And also remember, no nation can deprive you of your human rights. No nation can deprive you of your human rights. Bye-bye.